then meet it with an in-game advantage of their choosing, and that worked really well. And the most insidious problem was the fact that, you know, if you play a game at least every other day for 4 years, you're just going to be really good at the game. And there was this large disconnect between like what focus testers were telling us and what like new people at Sega's QA were telling us. And you know, I'd walk down the hall and the lead animator's like, "Our game's too easy. No one's going to like this." And what I did is I tried to use lead animator down the hall, who's like a savant at games. You know, he was my model for the hard mode. I figure if we can make a hard mode that challenges my coworkers, great. It's labeled hard, does what it says in the tin. The player doesn't have to choose a hard game experience. And then that gives us the baseline for something we know is going to challenge players. I mean, you can never account for like the 1% of gamers who just play RE4 with just the knife, but we figure we'll challenge most players on hard mode. Getting a good easy normal mode was a little bit harder. We had to resort to the fishbowl testing I was talking about earlier. We had the luxury that not everyone's going to have when you go into game design is you're not always surrounded by people who are in your company but not working directly in your game. We had people working on other projects, and we'd have their producer give them a task of spend half a day coming over to our side of the office, and we do the fishbowl testing and make them suffer through our game. And we really did find where our what we were missing and what we needed to do to make the easy normal experience work the best. So that's really how all these concepts really apply to Alpha Protocols. And this game was really challenging to make because we were making an action RPG hybrid, started in 2006, and we didn't really have a good roadmap for how to do it. We had Deus Ex, we had System Shock 2. We didn't have a lot of other great examples. And the other night I was playing Borderlands, and I was thinking, it'd be so great if this were out before we started this game. But yeah, just some random closing thoughts. Your coworkers are going to put a lot of time into your game. A lot of love goes into the game, not just from you. If you get obsessed with making your game super challenging and super cool and showing off, just how awesome you are and what a great challenge you can present, you're kind of shortchanging the other people on your project. One of the reasons why I suggest the difficulty curve I do is just to retain players. You want to retain as many people as you can in the beginning. You want to keep players adapting in the middle so they don't get bored. And then you want to have the difficulty drop off at some point, because every time that difficulty is rising, there's always the chance that someone's just going to say, "This is too hard for me." So really, you want your players to see every part of your game, beginning to end. So think about the S-curve and failure. Learn to love them. I think failure design is something that's it's easy to forget. You want to think that there should be a risk. There should be a threat. If failure is too easy, the player's going to feel like they can coast through the game. And I think there are ways to make failure cost the player, but not frustrate the player. Easier said than done, of course, but just think a lot about it. And my last point is, might sound like I'm trying to undermine everything I just said, but I do want to ask the question of, do games need challenge? My bias is yes. I'm up here ranting about it. But I think it's, you're making art and a product at the same time. And it's worth asking yourself, are you making a challenge that you want to play and that you think people should experience? Or are you making a challenge that a customer can really enjoy in their own way? Monkey Island is a fantastic game, and you could press Control W and it would say, "Do you want to win? Yes, no." You could say yes, and it would give you the end credits. And you're like, "Congratulations, you win. You got 5 million out of 5 million points. You're the best ever." It's a little sarcastic and mean, but is it bad if your game has a Control W win key? I mean, ideally your customer hopefully didn't pirate your game. Hopefully they paid good money for it. And if they want to just win the game, should they have that option? It's worth asking. So I want to thank you all for your attention and enduring my rant. As I said in the beginning, I really do want to hear feedback on this stuff. I do, I want to know if what I'm saying works for you, or if you have, disagreements with me, because the only way I'll get better at what I do is to constantly fail, which I'm good at, and constantly learn from failure, which I'm also good at. So yeah, there's my email addresses. You can contact me. I'll be super stressed out with libertarian rage as I do my taxes when I get home. But in the later part of the week, I'll be happy to respond to any emails. And yes, I did leave time for questions. So if you want to ask a question, please do so now, and please make them easy.
You were talking about how you really like Left 4 Dead, and it was the I forget what it was called, the procedural pacing.
Yeah.
Can you go more into that, like why you think that they're so good at it?
What I like about the game is their pacing makes it replayable. The guys who made it were actually upstairs from us. Not that I got to like go to their office and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" But I was able to talk to them a little bit about how it works, and I don't really know everything about it, but I do know that the the AI is sort of monitoring your stress, and it's kind of responding to like how much stress you're under, and it's purposely, you know, like stressing you out and then pulling back, stressing you out, pulling you back. And it also kind of has some randomness in it. So not only is it well paced in that sense that it gives you that roller coaster, but you can play the same level twice and it will give you different pacing. So you can't actually ever even master the pacing and say like, I know exactly how this level is going to play out. And that to me is amazing because you know, getting the right pacing is great, but what about for replayability? If the player knows what's coming, you know, is it possible to get exciting pacing on a replay? And they do, and that's amazing.
Hi. With your S-curve, with how it falls off at the end, do you ever find that players find, that implies that the final boss battle or whatever is easier than a boss battle that's, say, 2/3 of the way through the game? Wouldn't that be sort of disappointing for players?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I think a lot of games do use a constantly rising difficulty curve all the way to the end of the game. I think in my experience I've found that a lot of end bosses in games come across as easy, and that might be because they're intentionally designed as easy or the player is just so good by the time they get to the end boss. When we were making Neverwinter Nights 2, our end boss on the first draft was so incredibly hard. You had to be some sort of like D&D savant to figure it out. It was kind of neat in one way because like, yeah, what a satisfying end boss. Like you really have to apply everything you learned to beat the end boss. But then, you know, we got some testers who, you know, did playthrough testing, so they spent, you know, hours and hours doing a full playthrough of the game, and they said, you know what, you got me all the way to the end, and I can't beat it. And like a friend of mine had that problem with like Final Fantasy VIII, like everything scales with you. So, you know, he smelled the roses and leveled up and stuff like that, and then he just couldn't beat the end of the game because everything was also at like level 90 whatever. And I do think it's nice to have a climactic ending, and you can have an exciting climax with, you know, story and just the sensation of, yeah, I won the game. But if your game is always getting challenged all the way to the end, you just run the risk of creating that situation where a player spends all that time, but they don't see the end. But I certainly think, like, you know, what I'm saying is not that every single game should have an S-curve. I guess that's kind of the fallacy of this whole presentation is what I'm saying isn't right for every single game. But in my experience, really good games and the games, you know, I at least want to make, they'll challenge you, but, you know, it's not going to be a death march all the way to the end.
What did you think that they did right with Demon's Souls, and what did you think they did wrong with Demon's Souls?
I think in my mind, Demon's Souls is best when you are working with people who aren't trying to leave clues that lead you astray and actually help you out, and it becomes a really amazing game. And just the amount of challenge the game offers, it's one of the best, I think, collaborative games to play with someone. But then, on that note, I found it really hard to play single player. I actually didn't get very far into it single player until I just drafted one of my friends to help me out. And I think that's kind of an issue because I consider myself a pretty hardcore game player, and even I was kind of turned off by the like, hey, wait, someone left me a note. Oh, they were leading me in the totally wrong direction. Why did I even listen to that note? I mean, the game presents enough challenge as it is. It actually like invites people to give you false clues and stuff like that. I actually don't really know what they could do better because on the same hand, I actually really appreciate the design. I actually appreciate that it is such a, like, let's make a hardcore game. But, you know, maybe if there's just like more settings to say like, you know, somehow block griefers. But of course, if we knew how to block griefers, the internet would be awesome. We just don't know how to do that yet. So there should be like some sort of litmus test to like, are you a jerk? And like somehow it reads your mind so you can't cheat on that entrance exam. Like Kingdom of Loathing has an online chat program, but to actually chat in the game, you have to show that you know basic English and that you don't use leet speak. Like that's great. More games should have that. So.
You spoke a little bit about how sort of the division between casual and hardcore gamers and how ideally a game should offer challenge to both sides. What do you think of, I play World of Warcraft, and one of the big debates in that seems to be people getting angry about the fact that the game offers challenge to both sides. You have the casual saying, oh, we can't kill Arthas, you need to nerf him, and you've got the hardcore saying, we don't want casuals, you know, seeing Arthas, you know, they should be going off and collecting pets or something. What do you as a game designer feel about that sort of dichotomy and that argument, and yeah, what do you think?
That's a good question. When it comes to players whining about WoW, you can find any part of the game, someone will be whining about it somewhere. I'd like to look at that as an indication of passion. You don't waste your time on the forums ranting about these things unless you're mentally disturbed or really care about the game, possibly both. I think a game really ought to be as much to as many different people as possible. I think it's a very strange thing to whine about a game that, like, oh my gosh, it has content for people not like me. I think the goal is to make that content as accessible as possible. Like, I think it's cool if there are raid bosses that you have to be really hardcore to get. But if you have some sort of design where it's like, a casual player, if they grind enough, can eventually do it. That's nice. But you'll never quite accomplish that. I think it's actually fine to say, like, this game is a lot of things to a lot of people, but it can't be everything to everyone. That's just crazy because that everyone has different preferences. I mean, I'm kind of antisocial, so it takes a lot of effort to get me into an MMO. But I still think MMOs are great games, even if they're not to my liking. That's not a fault of the game. And I think with WoW, like, I hear that argument, and I almost want to say, like, it's great that you love the game, but do you really want other people to not have fun? I guess I just don't really deeply understand that why they would make that criticism. So, anything else? Questions? Anybody? All right.